All right. Y'all can see the title. So we're going to be reading some excerpts from this selective sayings of Marcus Garvey. So these are little clips here. And, it gives a pretty good preface and everything else. But let's go ahead and cut to some of what he says. Let Africa be our guiding star, our star of destiny. How dare anyone tell us that Africa cannot be redeemed when we have 400 million, now over 1 billion men and women with warm blood coursing through their veins? The power that Africa is not divine. The power that holds Africa is human, and it is recognized that whatsoever man has done, man can do. No one knows when the hour of Africa's redemption cometh. It is in the wind, it is coming. One day, like a storm, it will be here. When that day comes, Africa will stand together. Any sane man, race, or nation that desires freedom must first of all think in terms of blood. Why, even the Heavenly Father tells us that without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sins. Then how, in the name of God, with the history before us, do we expect to redeem Africa without preparing ourselves, some of us, to die? The political readjustment of the world means this, that every race must find a home, hence the great cry for Palestine for the Jews, Ireland for the Irish, India for the Indians, and simultaneously Africans, and raising the cry of Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Okay, let me do this one last little bit here, and then we'll get to the next little bit. The only wise thing for us ambitious Africans to do is to organize the world over and build up for the race a mighty nation of our own in Africa. And this race of ours that cannot get recognition and respect in the country where we are slaves by using our own ability, power, and genius will develop ourselves in another country in our habitat, a nation of our own, and be able to send back from that country, from that native habitat, to the country where we were once enslaved, representatives of our race that would get as much respect as any other ambassadors from any other race or nation. Skip over the Africa stuff here. Ambition. Ambition is the desire to go forward and improve one's condition. It is a burning flame that lights up the life of the individual and makes him see himself in another state. To the ambitious, it is to be great in mind and soul, to want that which is worthwhile and strive for it. To go on without looking back, reaching to that which gives satisfaction. To be humanly ambitious is to take in the world which is the province of man. To be divinely ambitious is to offend God by rivaling him in his infinite majesty. I know. Okay, here we go. Christianity. Now, this is very different than what the future, at the time, future Nation of Gods and Earth and the Nation of Islam would say, which is much more of an atheistic type of take, or the idea that Jesus was black and all this type of thing. A form of religion practiced by millions, but as misunderstood and unreal to the majority as gravitation is to the untutored savage. We profess to live in the atmosphere of Christianity, yet our acts are as barbarous as we have ever known, as if we never knew Christ. He taught us to love, yet we hate, to forgive, yet we revenge, to be merciful, yet we condemn and punish, and we still are Christians. If hell is what we are taught it is, then there will be no more Christians there than days in all creation. To be a true Christian, one must be like Christ and practice Christianity, not as a bishop does, but as he says, For if our lives were to be patterned after the other fellows, all of us, bishop, priest, and layman, would ultimately meet around the furnace of hell, and none of us, because of our sins, would see salvation. Christmas, I'm not going to worry about that. Yes. Communism. Because, of course, I know that this is something that Vosh talked about, of course, is that Marcus Garvey was a very strong, healthy anti-communist. We declared then, as we declare now, that the African should not allow himself to be absorbed by communism, because ultimately communism in its treatment of Africans will be no better than the other isms we have had since the African came in contact with European civilization. There is some truth to that. I'm just going to say that. There is some truth to that. We declared then, and still declare, that communism among Africans was only an effort to line up another powerful minority group with other discontented minority groups of the world to strengthen the hands of communism, to smash the present order, out of which rise a universal communism that will be as dangerous to the peace of the world and oppressive to control as any other system that went before. We claim then, and we claim now, that a European communist would be no different when he gets into power to the Southern cracker of the United States. The cracker has in his blood the desire, wish, to kill and brutalize the African because of his vaunted image of superiority based upon the difference of color. When you catch the communist beneath the surface, you will find him the same vicious Southerner whose political beliefs will not surmount his racial prejudices. And for this, we have always kept communism at bay. Hence, no one will mistake us for having any sympathy for the communists as far as bringing the African into communism is concerned. We are interested only to watch the results of their mighty effort and to seize our chance to be what we ought to be, by not being born fools. Can we blame the communists for calling us born fools in America when the opportunity was ripe, pointed the African toward the building up of great industrial enterprises, the establishment of steamship lines to link up commerce of the race throughout the world, and particularly between Africa, the West Indies, and North America? The intellectual fools of the African race laughed when I told them that it was time to get hold of Liberia and make it the center of world African activities, thereby demonstrating to the other nations that the colored man was able to build and control a nation of his own. The African intellectuals laughed again. We organized a plan for building 4 modern cities in the Republic of Liberia as the first concentration centers for the Africans of the West Indies and America to link up their intelligence with the native African in the scheme of nation building. When we were able to influence the Liberian government to give a concession of lands, and a budget of $2 million was prepared to start the work, and engineers and experts landed on the spot in Liberia, a black president of Liberia by the name of Charles Dunbar King, who had acquiesced to the proposition, saw the possibility of getting graft from Harvey Firestone, the American millionaire of the Firestone Rubber Company. He gave to the Firestone interest the landed concessions in Liberia that were intended to be the concentration centers of African colonists who were to go there to build up the republic and prove to the world that the African was capable in government. Just as the minute we have on our desk a confidential report we have received from Geneva, a plea from an ambassador from Liberia asking us to help now to do the thing that we attempted to do 8 years ago, because the Firestone interests have ravished the country and have reduced the people almost to a state of serfdom, to be mildly relieved only by the timely effort of the League of Nations. Do you wonder that the communists call a race so childish and simple born fools? We know that most of the Africans who have led communism in America and other parts of the world have done so because of the easy money they can collect from the Soviet Union or from the Communist Party. The New Jamaican, September 5th, 1932. Communism in the USA. If the African takes my advice, He will organize by himself and always keep his scale of wage a little lower than the whites until he is able to become, through proper leadership, his own employer. By doing so, he will keep the goodwill of the white employer and live a little longer under the present scheme of things. If not, between communism, white trade unionism, and workers' parties, he is doomed to the next 25 or 50 or 100 years to complete economic and general extermination. Confidence. If you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you have won even before you have started. Once again, there's some good stuff in there. Once again, you have to look at the realities. I was watching a video by Jason Unruh, and I saw how he was, once again, there's supposed to be radical people like Jason Unruh. And, he's talking about, of course, New York has, the state of New York has rescinded habeas corpus. And, it's so bad. It's so awful. Maybe eventually it'll come back. And the fuck do you care about it? Same thing with the ICC court, the International Criminal Court, and being mad that the United States won't allow people in. You are supposed to be against those things as a communist, right? You're supposed to smash these things into atoms, much like the military and police. It's not just as Lenin says in this case, it's that he was talking about government. Is that, keep it the same, but eventually that's going to be going. So you're only giving lip service to the system as it is today. What sort of rebellion, what sort of radicalist are you? That's just my take anyway. I'm sure the people will say that you're full of shit, and that's fine. Let me see here. I think we'll read this bit. Okay. As the Jew is held together by his religion, the white races by the assumption and the unwritten law of superiority, and the Mongolian by the precious tie of blood, so likewise the African must be united in one grand racial hierarchy. One union must know no clime, boundary, or nationality. Like the great Church of Rome, Africans the world over must practice one faith, that of confidence in themselves with one God, one aim, one destiny. Criticism is an opinion for good or ill, generally indulged in by the fellow who knows more than anyone else, yet the biggest fool. There is no criticism that calls not forth yet another. The last critic is the biggest fool of all. For the world starts and ends with him. He is the source of all knowledge, yet knows nothing. For there is not a word one finds to use that there is not another that hath the same meaning. Then wherefore do we criticize? We're going to skip over death. Disarmament. Present-day statesmen are making the biggest blunder of the age if they believe that there can be any peace without equality and justice to all mankind. Any attempt at disarmament when half the world oppresses the other half is but a farce, because the oppressed will make their oppressors get armed sooner or later. Economics. A race that is solely dependent upon another for its economic existence sooner or later dies, as we have in the past been living upon the mercy shown us by others, and by the chances obtainable, and have suffered therefrom. So will we in the future suffer if an effort is not made now to adjust our own affairs. It is only a question of time when the African, economically dependent as he is on the white man, will be forced to the wall, and that the solution of the problem in the future would not be such by the wholesale killing or wiping out of African populations, but by well-organized economic starvation. Education. Education is the medium by which a people are prepared for the creation of their own particular civilization and the advancement and glory of their own race. To be learned in all that is worthwhile knowing, not to be crammed with the subject matter of the book or the philosophy of the classroom, but to store away in your head such facts as you need for the daily application of life, so that you may be better in all things, understand your fellow men, and interpret your relationship to your Creator. You can be educated in soul, vision, and as well in mind. To see your enemy and know him is a part of the complete education of man. To spiritually regulate oneself is another form of the higher education that fits man for a nobler place in life. And still, to approach your brother by feeling of your own humanity is an education that softens the ills of the world and makes us kind indeed. Many a man was educated outside the schoolroom. It is something you let out, not completely take in. You are a part of it, for it is natural. It is dormant simply because you will not develop it. But God created every man with it knowingly or unknowingly to him who possess it. That's the difference. Develop yours, and you will be as great and full of knowledge as the other fellow without even entering the classroom. Africa invites capital to develop its resources. Let not the capital, whether it be financial or manpower, be supplied by white men, but let us as Africans make our contribution. All that Africa needs is proper education, information. The African abroad has much of that, and it is our duty to prepare our brothers as to prepare them on guard against the tricky exploiters of Europe who have been deceiving and robbing them of their possessions. There's a lot of good stuff in here. A lot of good quotes. Forward to Africa. The future. Like I say, I think that, see, this is the whole thing, is that people like Vosh, and I know, it's like you can hear that, yeah, I mean, he obviously says race, this and that, but I think that, I think that we are lying to ourselves here in the United States by saying, oh, yes, well, Black Lives Matter, and we're all going to get along, and, we're going to, include white folks and Hispanics and everything else. Those things are going to break down. We need to stop lying to ourselves and pretending that we can all get along, because that's just silly. I'm sorry, it is. It's silly, and it has never completely worked that way. In a multicultural society, and this is going to sound very Wignatish, so you can just bear with me, but in a multicultural society, there are going to be groups of people that are stronger than others. And no, I'm not just referring to just those folks. Well, I'll just put those in quotes. But it's not just that. There will be other groups of people that will learn how to gain the system and to learn how to overstep their bounds and be able to, create more. Think about it like this. We look to the idea of the Russian mafia in the Soviet Union. Even though it's called Russian mafia, more than anything else is it, I would imagine from more research, a lot of those folks were originally from Georgia. That's where Stalin is from. And of course, Stalin's real name is Joseph Yugashvili, And then he changed to Stalin, which of course, is steel in Russian. So I think, it needs to be put into perspective, I think that, nonetheless, I think there's some very good information to learn from this. And of course, people like him, people like Vosh who want to talk nonsense and who don't realize that people like, you can talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, as much as you want to. But the thing is that Marcus Garvey influenced and really set down a lot of ideas and created the idea of going back to Africa and including more of that. That was really the start. So let me read one last little passage here. And it's not as violent, let's say, is what people like Cordiani would say about traitors. But let's read this a little bit about traitors. In the fight to reach the top, the oppressed have always been encumbered by the traitors of their own race, made up of those of little faith and those who are generally susceptible to bribery for selling out of the rights of their own people. The traitor of other races is generally confined to the mediocre or irresponsible individual, but unfortunately the traitors among the African race are generally to be found among the men highest placed in education and society, the fellows who call themselves leaders. Like I say, there is a lot of good stuff in here. This is a fairly short. This is how many pages? This is fairly 57, 58, 59. This is 60 pages. This is 60 pages with a lot of good stuff in here. I really do think there's a lot of good stuff. I'll read, you know what? Why not? I'll read one more here. Let me see here. Woman. Let's see what Marcus Garvey says about women. What the night is to the day is woman to man. The period of change that brings light and darkness, darkness out of light, and semi-light out of darkness are the changes we find in women day by day. In woman day by day. She makes one happy, then miserable. You are to be to her, to kind, her to her kind, then unkind, constant yet inconstant. Thus we have woman. No real man can do without her. We are circumvented today by environments more dangerous than those which circumvented other peoples in any other age. We are face to face with environments in a civilization that is highly developed, a civilization that is competing with itself for its own destruction, a civilization that cannot last because it has no spiritual foundation, a civilization that is vicious, crafty, dishonest, immoral, irreligious, and corrupt. So there we are. Like I say, let's read this stuff in the back, though, just to kind of give you an idea of the guy who organized this book. Now, these are selective writings of Marcus Garvey. It was organized by a different gentleman. And let's see what he says here. So he says, right now, melanin, the aromatic biopolymer, an organic semiconductor that makes black people black, is worth over $380 a gram, more than gold. Melanin is worth more than gold, silver, platinum, palladium, rhodium, and coltan combined. In just a few short years, on August 13, 2020, the red, black, and green flag will be celebrated as the colors of all African people. We also know the song lyric, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but with ourselves can free our minds," commonly associated with Bob Marley, actually originated with Marcus Garvey. We are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, for through others may free the body. None but ourselves can free the mind. Those are the words which Marcus Garvey spoke in October 1937. The place? Menelick Hall in Sydney, Nova Scotia. This selection of sayings of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey provides an introduction to the mind of a man capable of speaking words into existence which continue to have a profound impact on those who hear them to this very day. I think this is something that I think if you want to understand how BLM has kind of gone off the path on that and how these things go, you have to remember is that people like this Blackbird Guard, aka Chris Winston, will call people like Marcus Garvey pork chop nationalists, I believe is the word that was originally used by Huey Newton. The thing is that a lot of what guides these ideas, what guides Black Maoists in general, or whichever Black separatist movement that you have, is based. A lot of it, W.E.B. Du Bois definitely helped some of that, of course, and plenty of other people like My mind is gone. Anyway, but you have a lot of what the base of what he was of going back to Africa and creating Pan-Africanism as we know it today. That comes from Marcus Garvey, a man from I believe he was from Jamaica. I've heard some of his speeches. And of course, you know what? I'm not gonna belittle him. I'm just gonna say, you know what? He was a good guy. I'm just gonna say it. I think he was a good guy. And I think regardless is that Marcus Garvey, though, you can paint him as a fascist, as people like Vosh will do, and will, the thing is that you have to be aware of who is talking the talk and who's walking the walk, And if you just, want to be a black dude who hates crackers and just wants to smash them up and everything, my brother, you're not going to go that far. I'm just going to tell you right now. If you do stumble on this and you skip to the end of it, that's going to be, you're just not going to go that far. If you just want to kill crackers and kill honkies and get your experience out of that, then you're not going to get that far. I'm just going to tell you right now, you're not going to get that far, because eventually that'll either get boring or you're going to meet someone that can actually fight. And it's not going to be pretty for you. It's not going to be pretty for you. And I think that's all I can really say. That's all I can really say, man. And, nonetheless, I hope y'all enjoyed some of those snippets from Marcus Garvey. I almost feel like, let me do one more. Let's just make it 30 minutes. And that way we can make it really cringe. Let's see here. Utopia. Here we go. Here's a short thing about Utopia. There are hundreds of millions of black men who are proud of our skins, and to us, the African empire will not be a utopia, neither will it be dangerous nor fail to serve our best interest. But we realize that, like the leopard, we cannot change our skins. Like I say, Marcus Garvey is definitely a fascinating character. A lot of, the black commies today, I hate to say it like that, but the Marxist-Leninists, Maoists, and these other Marxist-Leninists, they don't like people like Marcus Garvey. And they'll say, the same thing about the Nation of Islam and say, oh, well, they're so, yeah, but what are the new Black Panthers going to do? New Black Panthers, of course, was started by a gentleman who used to be part of the Nation of Islam. So those ideas are still going to be there. I believe, let me see here what I'm doing. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name who was part of the new Black Panther, who helped start the new Black Panther Party. What was his name? I'm trying to think of it. He was with the, let me see here, the new Black Panther Party. Yes, Quanell X. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, Quanell X. Yeah, Houston, Texas. He's the leader of the new Black Panther Nation in Houston, Texas. He was born in L.A. Both parents were Nation of Islam converts. I can't talk anymore. I'm sorry. Quanell Evans was inspired by Louis Farrakhan, angered by Jewish protests over a conference dedicated to the Black Holocaust. Quanell X was quoted in the New York Daily as saying, you know what, I'll just be kidding. But yeah, Quanell X got in trouble as well because I think that he lost money, and he's another one of these guys, of course, location just outside Pasadena, Texas. Okay. So he's pretty much just a Houston guy. Lives in very nice neighborhoods, this and that. But of course, these folks have much more organization than any sort of Marxist-Leninist Maoist group. I don't care if you call yourself a black Maoist. The thing is that you're still going to be at odds because China doesn't feel the same way. And I doubt even people like Mao Zedong felt the same way about black folks that you think he did. It's like, you can go ahead and use your ideas all day, but how did he really feel about black folks? You know what I'm saying? That's what I don't get, is that you're going to be constantly at odds. You're constantly at odds defending Mao Zedong, or, not Mao Zedong thought, as Maoists always try to separate themselves, but you're always going to be trying to defend Mao Zedong, or at least trying to defend those ideas. And you're going to be at odds because those folks never gave a damn about you. That's the whole thing. That's why even with Kwame Ture, he distanced himself from it. I remember hearing one of his speeches, and he was saying that, Marx didn't invent socialism. He just simply observed it and wrote it down. It's the same thing with, Newton. He didn't invent the idea of gravity. He just simply observed it, and that's what he called it. That's all it was. I think it's good to put into perspective. So that Mao Zedong didn't invent the idea of People's Protracted War. That's just the name that he put upon it. And he was able to influence people in these small Chinese villages in the north. And was able to, after the after the huge problems of the falling of the Qing dynasty in 1911, and the warlords that took over, of course, to a point is that the warlords of the Ma clique did take part in what could be called, at least on a basic level, maybe primitive socialism in some parts. I think that Ma Bufang was part of that. And anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think that it's interesting, to say the least, where this is going to go. And I think that, if nothing else, I can respect Marcus Garvey for recognizing the idea of what I've said. When worst comes to worst, my peoples come first. That's the whole thing that you get with a lot of these, black nationalists today. You'll see that B1, black first. And you got to respect that. I don't care what you say. You have to respect that is how they feel. Now, of course, people say, oh, well, it's about freeing all the people. And, it's the same thing. I can go on and on, but I think I've repeated myself far too much. So I'm going to end it there. I just wanted to give some reading from this book that I got yesterday about Marcus Garvey. I do think it's fascinating. And I think I'll keep it there. So if there's no other comments or anything else, I think I will bid y'all adieu. And I say good night to all of you. And hopefully tomorrow, oh, Lord have mercy. I don't even know what to say about it. Let's just say hopefully tomorrow will be a little bit better. Anyway, see you later, folks. Have a good night.